Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 26th of February 2024, and I'm a little bit late to it today. I'm just doing an awful lot of kind of doom scrolling and looking at how the world is just going nuts and looking at what's going on across the other side of the pond. And it is insane. It's so insane. And I am quite perturbed just in general, but also very worried for Ukraine, since there appears to be a geopolitical turncoat action, and it's freaking me out quite a bit. Anyway, that will translate into probably some fairly long videos today just to explain what the devil is going on. In the meantime, let's look at the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find those in the description to the video below. Here we have 1,170 personnel lost, which is about where we've seen it over the last few days or so. A little bit up and down, but generally in that 1,100 to 1,300 range. Then we have another day of heavy tank losses, and it's weird that this keeps happening, or is happening quite a bit at the moment. 19 tanks, which is double the daily average, broadly speaking. And yet troop-carrying AFVs are below the daily average. Then we have 120 vehicles and fuel tanks, which is typically high. And again, possibly goes to tanks being used in a manner that is representative of the lack of equipment they may well be facing. So a lack of infantry fighting vehicles and APCs and general troop-carrying vehicles means that they are using tanks because tanks have been less useful in terms of the type of warfare there is at the moment is get your troops to a tree line really quick, get down that tree line, take the tree line, okay, then once we secured that, get it to the next tree line or next dugout, you're going to take that, and tanks doing that haven't been so useful. And so the Russians haven't been using tanks in their typical way, and I think they're just essentially co-opting them as troop-carrying vehicles. 15 troop-carrying AFVs is below the daily average, but it's a useful number, give or take. 34 artillery systems is above the daily average, and we've seen that be pretty high consistently over the last few weeks or so. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems is very good in that category, and there's been quite a lot of anti-aircraft warfare systems lost in the last couple of weeks. So no Andrew Perpetua data out yet, but I will be very happy when they are released. That is a pretty good day for the Ukrainians, but a bit of movement in some of these categories. Now, there is actually quite a few pieces of video footage coming out of activities going on, so I'll share them with you. Of course, you can watch your full ones at your leisure. They are linked in the description below. So here, a soldier of the Force of Freedom Battalion broke through to a Russian trench, threw grenades and forced 6 occupiers to surrender. That's pretty impressive for a single fighter, and there they all are. We also have Ukrainian Special Forces have eliminated a platoon of Russian forces during a raid on an industrial complex in the Donetsk sector. It says Nell reports one Russian was captured and revealed the location of his unit and ammo depots. These arsenals were destroyed on the same day, and you can see all of that in the Telegram channel linked in Noel Reports' summary of that. So a few good events there for the Ukrainians. Of course, no doubt will be Russian videos as well to show their successes. You can go and find them if you want to on the socials, particularly Telegram. Defense forces continue the fight for independence of Ukraine, says the Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. Quote, since the beginning of the year alone, our soldiers have destroyed 510 tanks and 1,125 armoured combat vehicles of the enemy. So a lot of equipment being claimed to have been destroyed there by the CIC of the Ukrainian the Ukrainian forces, which then leads to this. And we've seen this a number of times, right? These photos and videos of donkeys. But here we've got a Russian soldier actually giving a testimony about this. We bought this donkey in a cry of despair, he says. There were no options left. That's how we fight. Russian army continues to use animals for delivering ammunition, etc. to the front line, says Anton Gerashenko, Russian soldiers say they were forced to buy a donkey to perform deliveries as they have no equipment at all. So there are areas of the front line where the Russians do have equipment that they are pushing through and they are having success. But there are other areas where things are pretty desperate for the Russians and they are calling out. Here this guy says it's a cry of despair. And, you know, you've got to... You can deny that and claim it's fake or something. But realistically, that is happening along the front lines. We are seeing enough pictures now of Russians using donkeys to know that it's more than just an anecdote. Right, a Nemesis unit continues to deplete Russian frontline air defense capabilities. This is a Strela 10 that was destroyed by a drone dropping IED, and that a drone dropped IED. That is adding to, you know, these anti-aircraft system figures that we're seeing consistently decent at the moment. Long may that continue. MiG-29 strikes a place of concentration of the invaders and their means of communication and electronic warfare. So that's a guided glide bomb, one would think, dropped from the MiG-29. And on that, I'm going to refer to Fighterbomber, who is a pretty reliable, thought to be a pilot, an actual active pilot. Some say that is a war blogger. Russian pilot Fighterbomber says that the effectiveness of Russian guided glide bombs fell off a cliff recently due to widespread electronic warfare interference on both sides, and that Ukrainian countermeasures have now rendered satellite-guided corrections useless. So we're actually going to read this. Quite a lot to go through here, but I think it's going to be useful. What's going on in Laotian? That's Russian aviation. Okay, well, probably nothing new. Flying, shooting, bombing, launching, winning. The average monthly flight hours per crew are now slightly higher than what they used to be for an entire year, but there's a catch. Today's entire section is dedicated to this catch. The golden era of the divine UMPK, guided glide bomb, turned out to be short-lived. In fact, I wrote long ago, many years before the full-scale war, that Ukraine would eventually find a countermeasure against the UMPK and preemptive action was necessary. There's no doubt that UMPKs play a massive role and literally saved the Russian aerospace forces from enormous losses. But nothing lasts forever, and people, being the creatures they are, will do everything possible to survive. Those who actually care, of all ranks and backgrounds, have been sounding the alarm for a while, but in keeping with the ancient tradition of Laos, nobody gives an F. The bombs are still flying, planned targets are being hit, everyone's busy, charts and presentations look prettier than ever, and the numbers of sorties and destroyed targets in reports have grown so large that briefers are reading them with bated breath, occasionally shedding a single noble tear. But there's a catch. They're missing. All satellite-guided correction systems have actually left the chat. Both Russian and Ukrainian electronic warfare specialists have mastered portable and mobile electronic warfare stations, which now saturate the front line on both sides, rendering satellite-guided corrections for all munitions, not just UMPKs, useless. Just like radio-controlled drones are slowly getting phased out, sure, against large area targets like factories, industrial plants and cities, a lone UMPK will still land, but there are no such targets on the front line. Sure, the tactics could be changed, like using just one UMPK per target, but maybe 8 or 16 instead. With statistical error compensation, perhaps one bomb out of the bunch would actually destroy the target. Back in the day, this was called volley bombing, and standard bombing methods, the standard bombing method for all bombers. But as you can imagine, this would mean reporting that out of 16 bombs, only one actually hit the target. Maybe. And who wants to do that? You get the idea. The electronic warfare situation in the enemy's rear isn't much better, but there are zones where a munition can adjust its course mid-flight. Also, at altitudes below 50 meters, there are occasional gaps in electronic warfare coverage, so long-range munitions relying on satellite correction fare slightly better, but not by much. All high-value targets are guaranteed to be covered by electronic warfare, and in those cases, accuracy depends on how much ammunition drifts off course without correction over a kilometer. What needs to be done? Stop flying for the sake of flying and dropping bombs for the sake of dropping bombs. Shift focus to fewer targets but with more UMPKs per target. Accept the axiom that a single UMPK today can only hit a target by accident or on a test range. Acknowledge this reality in commanders' reports. Develop munitions with laser guidance using drones for target illumination, improve TV guidance and data transmission systems, invest in inertial navigation systems, because no matter what, the future belongs to autonomous INS. So this is when you are blocked. There are other guidance systems you can use other than sort of GPS. Report concluded. Oh, and just to reiterate, this is all happening in Russia. Everything on our side is effing great. The enemy has no electronic warfare at all. If a UMPK or missile misses, it's purely the pilot's fault. Every bomb and missile we launch hits its target. Ask any officer ranked general or higher. They'll swear it's true. Obviously, a lot of tongue-in-cheek there at the end. But interesting synopsis of the failure of guided glide bombs at the moment. So although we've seen them go back up, peak back up to the level they were before there were, I don't know, ammunition depots hit, air defences hit, planes having to go back, some plane losses, etc. All of those things probably combined forced the Russians not to use so many guided glide bombs. Now they've got it back up to the level they were using sort of at their peak. But the idea here is that, most of them are missing. They're just, they're not effective at the moment, which is great news for Ukraine. Okay, just as the Russians have done, the Ukrainians here showing that it is useful. And I said, you can laugh at things like nets and whatnot, but they're put up because they have they are functional. And here we have in the Kursk region, Ukrainians putting up a net tunnel to protect from drones. So that they can drive. I don't know how long that is. I always wonder as well, like actually building these things must be a dangerous thing. It takes a lot of time to do that, and the drones will surely just come and hit you making that. So, but nonetheless, that is shown on that video. And Tim White says, okay, Nazi thugs in Moscow set fire to the front door of the apartment of Baitu singer Lyova, real name Yegor Bortnik. Baitu, a really big band. They were the ones that got, if you remember, they were playing in Thailand, was it? And then they got arrested and they were going to be deported to Russia. But I think because many of them have dual passports, Israeli, Russian passports, the Australians and Israelis got it so that the Thai authorities didn't deport them. They were just playing a gig. But because they're anti-war, they're Russians who are, anti kind of Putin, if you like. That's what got them in trouble in Thailand, right? But anyway, this who is it? Is he singer? Yeah, this singer has long since moved abroad, but the flat was then registered to his ex-wife's name, and that was set on fire. It follows Bortnik admitting he gives €5,000 a month to Ukraine's army. On the wall next to Baitu's vocalist's flat, Arsonist wrote, "Hi to the enemy and traitor," from the pianist. So there you go, that has happened. Now we're going to go on to distant strikes, and it was a very busy night across much of occupied Ukraine and also deep into Russia. We don't have too many details yet. We're going to start with, obviously, as we normally do, the strikes inside Ukraine. There were another 177 Russian drones flying into Ukrainian skies. That is absolutely phenomenal. They just keep doing this. Huge numbers. A few days over 267 was the record the other day. But 177 is huge. Ukrainian air defense shot down 110 of those Russian drones, and then 66 were suppressed by electronic warfare. So that actually makes 176, meaning of all of those 177, only one got through. But of course, all of those will be falling down. That's 177 fires on the ground that you are going to have. And Tim White says, and he said this yesterday, obviously, as I didn't close yesterday's thread until after 3 a.m, most of the photos and videos of the damage caused were at the end of Tuesday's thread, but there are some new photos released by Ukraine's fire service for their work in and around Bucha and Kyiv. So this is what happens when the drones fall to the floor, and if they fall to the ground in urban areas, you are going to have trouble, which is why when you look at, and thanks to Paul Sabina, who's put me onto this site, which is basically the firm's site. This uses the firm's data, which is developed by NASA to look for wildfires. But you can see that usually where there are substantial strikes by drones and whatnot. So fires up here, all the way in the east of Russia. I don't know, they might not have anything to do with anything. There were some strikes near Moscow. I don't know over here whether, I mean, this looks like a lot of burning going on in Ukraine, and I think that's probably the Kyiv area somewhat there. So no doubt a lot of drones hitting around there. Down in Odessa as well, so that's the Danube River, and you probably around Reni and Ishmael, you've got some strikes there. You've got those gas rigs out in the Black Sea, and then you've got around Kherson there, and then a couple in occupied Ukraine. But actually, as of now, no fires burning where we understand there were strikes by the Ukrainians. As you can see, there are some dots in and around Russian territory there. Right, so going back to the tabs here, there were fires, as you can see there. That would pop up on the firm's data, no doubt, and that would be falling debris. And so a lot of those small red dots on that map will be from falling debris. If we zoom in here, you can see them. Well, you should be able to see them. There you go. Just make them a little bit bigger for you. And you can play around with maps like this. This is not the original firm's map, which is also really useful. I haven't worked out on this one whether you can go back in time, because I'd like to actually go back in time like 10 hours to see when the strikes were taking place, whether there's some firm's analysis around that time to see these strikes on Russia. But anyway, while Ukrainian drones are flying over occupied Crimea, Russia launched drones into Ukraine. Reportedly, one hit a residential building in Kyiv. That was a really substantial fire, I think. There was some detail about that. I think there were a lot of residents in that building. I'm not sure if anyone died from that. I know that there was someone pulled out of rubble. I think Tim was talking about this. There was a Ukrainian woman, I think, pulled out rubble earlier today. Power outages in Odessa region. So there you go, overnight strikes in Odessa region, and that's confirmed by that firm's data. And let's see if there's anything further down. Yeah, another body's been found in the Kyiv region in the wreckage there. During the night, the first body was removed. Another two were injured in the attack on a village of Kryakivchina, something like that, near Bucha. So some of these areas north of Kyiv there being hit. But it could well be just drones falling to the ground. In fact, that's almost certainly what it is, as opposed to actual targets being taken out. Now, the Ukrainians were sending, well, they did send an awful lot of drones, possibly drone missiles, don't really know, into occupied Ukraine. There were theories that they were going for the Kerch Bridge last night, but I don't think so. Near Syrsky Airfield, so that's in Crimea, explosions are heard. Meanwhile, Russian channels also report the threat of Ukrainian naval drones. There were all sorts of alarms going off right across, particularly Crimea yesterday. But we are yet to find out what the damage was. No really significant battle damage assessment. There were talks about drones getting shot down. Some of the Russian channels last night were saying drones are getting shot down, over the Black Sea as they're coming in towards Crimea. So I think that implies that there are still some pretty active air defense systems on the west coast of Crimea. But anyway, last night, massive Ukrainian drone strike targeted Kuban and occupied Crimea. In Tuapse, reports mentioned 40 explosions, home to a seaport and an oil refinery. So Tuapse is sort of down the coast of the Black Sea, somewhere around here, and yet nothing on the firm's data there, but it could well have all been put out now, but still have caused extensive damage. We just don't know. 40 explosions there. You would think that something's happened. Blasts were also heard in Sevastopol. Russia claims to have shot down 128 drones last night. And no doubt Russia will be taking out the majority of drones, but it's about saturation, isn't it? And making sure, just as we heard with the guided glide bombs, you could drop 16 of those bombs in the hope that one hits the target. And that's kind of what Fighterbomber was advocating you need to do. Well, it's kind of the same for these drones as well. Now, the Russian oil refinery in Tuapse was targeted by drones. 2 drones targeted the territory of the enterprise. As a result, part of the ELOU AVT-12 was damaged. The crude oil pipeline was also damaged. I mean, I don't know what that does. This is the only oil refining unit of the plant's territory. Its damage means that the plant will be out of action until the damage is repaired. The capacity of the ELOU AVT-12 is 12 million tons of oil per year, and that's where it is, the Tuapse one, down the coast from Novorossiysk, but nothing on the firm's data now. There is, according to Crimean Wind Telegram channel, there was a fire that broke out at the Lukhovitsky, that's Tretyakovo Airfield in the Moscow region of the Russian Federation, and indeed, that might, I don't know, it's difficult to know because there's no other information on this map, but it could be one of these dots over there. I don't know where the Ukrainian border is, to be honest, with relation to these dots. I would have thought Moscow would be somewhere up here, though. Nonetheless, there was firms data, localized firms data, to suggest something was struck there. Cause of the fire near the runway is unknown, though. And then we hear about the strike from the other night. The Ryazan oil refinery, which is a really substantial refinery, halts operations following a drone strike. According to Reuters, it suspended operations after its drone strike hit the crude distillation unit, CDU-6, and that was on fire. And that's obviously good news because that is a significant blow to their hydrocarbons output. Okay, now on to other bits and pieces. As the Russian mortgage market collapses to a mere $1.46 billion, consider that even tiny Portugal is $2.9 billion. That's from November 2024. Trump is discarding massive economic allies in favor of a primitive and genocidal backwater that's also intent on destroying the West. So Spravdi reports here, the Stratcom Center, that the Russian mortgage market has collapsed to lows not seen in 6 years, with mortgage issuance for the month of January 2025 falling to 127 billion rubles. That's $1.46 billion. And the percentage of loans that are state subsidized increased to a record 85%. So I presume this black line is state subsidized loans, obviously because private loan companies aren't going to be doing that. The interest rates are, of course, absolutely massive. So really low mortgage issuance. The entire Russian mortgage market is now less than a month of Netflix global revenue. Wow. Share preferential loans, that's the black line, and then volume of loans provided per month. So that is an indicator that the Russian economy is teetering, right? Okay, moving on. CryptoWiki has a thread here that we're going to go through. It's quite substantial. Let's chomp through at least some of it. Civil engineer who was mobilized into the Russian army despite ill health has escaped to Germany and spoken about the chaos and brutality he saw. His regiment was told by its commander, quote, "You came here to die." He was later arrested and tortured for trying to flee. 44-year-old Georgy from Lyubetsy near Moscow has told the story to Radio Free Europe. He was mobilized in September 2022 despite serious heart problems and was sent to a training ground where he wandered aimlessly and fired a few times from rusty automatic rifles. He has protested against being mobilized but was assured initially that he would be sent to a construction battalion where skills as a civil engineer would be valuable. Despite this, he was sent to a frontline Russian unit fighting in Ukraine in November 2022. Quote, "The feeling was that no one knows anything, terrible chaos, no coordination, no supplies. It was as if we were transported in a time machine to 1941 with the Germans when they were advancing on Moscow. Complete chaos, only the form was different. Late autumn, rain, mud, muddy roads, destroyed villages, war passed over the land." He and his comrades were sent to a forest near Svatova in the Luhansk region with raincoats or tools to chop wood for shelters. They bought supplies from local people at their own expense. Quote, the first days were like Robinson Crusoe on a desert island, surviving in a world without anything. They didn't give us anything. We slept on the ground in the rain and snow, it lit fires, and I was thinking about how to escape from there. I immediately realised that this was a one-way ticket, judging by the attitude of the officers, the command staff. It was clear that they weren't considering us as a combat unit, as soldiers. They'd simply bought a portion of cannon fodder that had to play its role and die heroically. It was clear that they'd say how they saved on supplies. Why feed them and water them if they would be killed tomorrow? In their neighbourhood forest, there were Chechen Akhmatovites, that's from the Akhmat battalion, and air defence men. And judging by the equipment, it was clear who needed to be protected and who didn't. The area was a focus of heavy fighting at the time. At one point, his regiment commander, Colonel General Alexander Zavadski, turned up to give a motivational speech. Quote, he lined everybody up and said, "You came here to die." At least he was honest. Quote, if you want to go on holiday, 300, i.e. wounded. If you want to go for food, 200, i.e. killed. He said, that's the kind of motivational speech it was. Georgy managed to escape from the disorganized encampment and hitched a lift to Troitska in the northern Luhansk region near the Russian border, which was equally chaotic. Quote, there was brownie emotion, a bunch of mobilized people, no one had anything, everyone was spreading out and to neighboring cities and villages in search of food and materials to set up their daily lives. They would arrive in the city, not have time to go to the store. They needed somewhere to spend the night. Some officers tried to help their soldiers, but not all of them, and the hospital's emergency room was turned into a flop house. A local man helped Georgy and 3 others to travel to a point where near the border, which was sealed with a barbed wire fence. While they were crossing it, a Russian helicopter spotted them and opened fire, killing 2 of the escapees. Georgy and the other survivor were captured by FSB border guards and taken back across the border, where they were imprisoned in an army-run torture center in a basement in the Luhansk village of Rozsypne. The site is a former Ukrainian border service facility which President Zelensky visited in November 2020. It's now been repurposed by the Russian army as a place of pain and terror. Georgy describes it as a brand new building. The basement has sandy floors. They nailed together bunks, divided the space in half for the good ones who could be re-educated, where I ended up, and for the bad ones who, as I understood, were not needed. People were beaten to death there. They were taken there to clean up. We were taken there to clean up. There was even blood on the ceiling. You sit in a stone cell. They take you out to the toilet in the morning and evening. There's no connection with the outside world. So on and so forth. Talks about torture an awful lot. And then he was eventually sent to a hill west of the town where thousands of men who had left their units were forced to live in the open with no food or shelter. Other refuseniks have given similar accounts. While some men waited there for days or weeks, Georgy was almost immediately press-ganged into a Storm Z unit comprised of convicts and deserters who were routinely used as cannon fodder in assaults. However, his frontline career did not last long. He was taken to the zero line, just talks of terrible conditions, evacuated back to Russia, and then he was arrested while visiting Moscow, and was flown to Kaliningrad, where he's assigned to the 7th Guards Motorized Rifle Regiment. So that's a bit lucky. He was in Kaliningrad, and it appears he escaped from there. But I'm not going to go into the rest of it because it's a 41 tweet thread. But he escaped, and he tells a story about the chaos and horror of serving in the Russian armed forces there. Okay, talking about horror, this, as I've said to you many times, I hate it when children are brainwashed because I find it deeply disturbing. So this is a kid and another kid there through the fields. In the fields, we shoot at the chochols, which is that slur for Ukrainians. For Russia and grandfathers, we'll shoot all the chochols. Hello, Russian world. Happy February the 23rd. That's lovely that children at that age are just... thank you, Russian world and all the cities. Happy holidays. And there you go, all the religious iconography up there. So that's what you do when you have strong religious feelings is you teach not forgiveness, but you teach your child to murder Ukrainians. Goodness me. Of course, I'm not saying that's what all religious people do, but that is a particularly interesting end to that video. Right, the analyst says the Russian regime, and this is interesting because I've said this before. Jonathan Fink is big on this. Many have talked about this, but let's just go through this idea of demobilization. So the Russian regime is petrified by the threat of the demobilized. Putin is said to be more than concerned about what to do with probably 300,000 to 400,000 demobilized troops once the ceasefire is obtained. The state can't afford to keep paying them, so we'll have to send them home. The speed of this process is likely to be fairly rapid, with large numbers making their own way back because they won't wait for the military to arrange it. That leaves the prospect of illegal weapons in civilian life. The level of discontent among those returning is known to be high. The government fears a backlash as the reality of the front gets out amongst the general public. Add to that, there's what happens to these men in terms of jobs and post-war care. Are they returning to a life of basic destitution, having fought for their country? Russian history is peppered with disgruntled army returnees setting off disturbances, and even a revolution in 1917 to 1919. Programs to get military personnel into government jobs are being pushed, but there are nowhere enough to go around. An attempt to offer land in conquered areas of Ukraine to soldiers to act as colonizers is not working well either, leaving authorities wondering what to do about handling so many semi-angry men who feel hard done by. It's a difficult problem, one that frightens the government because they know, if mishandled, where this can go. Meanwhile, North Korean forces have been left to starve in the Kursk after repeated failures to deliver supplies. Ukrainian forces cut them off using drones, and the Russians failed miserably to break the drone blockade. Mass surrenders of North Koreans are expected. Obviously, that's an upbeat view of what's going on up there. Right. Then we're going to go on to this. I'm going to discuss this in much more detail in one of my videos later today. But there is an analysis by a bunch of economists for Ukraine, that has shown that the cost of the US aid to Ukraine. So I know Trump keeps saying it's 350 billion, blah, blah, blah. The reality is it's much less than that. Well, in fact, it's now thought to be even half of what that is. And this goes to some of the rationale I've been talking about myself that I always hit you with, which is the cost of obsolete equipment, the book value, and all this kind of stuff. The actual cost of US military aid to Ukraine is 18.3 billion instead of more than 60 billion declared by Washington. The main reason for the disagreement is the overestimation of old American equipment. Now, the Americans know that they overestimated a number of times because they re-evaluated, if you remember, and they suddenly found that actually there was another $6 billion to be able to give to Ukraine. And then at another point, it was some more money, not more than 6 billion, but a bunch of money. So, the Americans had done that previously, and this is looking at the idea that, just generally everything was over-evaluated. So that's going to be interesting to look through. The IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, urges sports federations to allow Russians and Belarusian athletes to compete so they can qualify for next year's Winter Olympics. Russians are now banned from major events like biathlon, alpine skiing, and ice hockey due to the war in Ukraine. This is another sign that people are just ready to forget about the war in Ukraine. Let's just do business with the Russians again. Let's just forget all the sanctions. You can be a horrific person, and then as long as just enough time has passed, we can forget about it. It doesn't really matter. And I think that's really horrible. Now, Geo Insider says Justin Minsk, so that's Belarus, has ratified an agreement allowing Russia to create military facilities in Belarus. Also, under the treaty between Russia and Belarus, both countries will treat an armed attack on any member of their union state as an attack on the entire union, triggering retaliatory measures using all available forces. This is what was signed with North Korea and allows North Korean soldiers to be used to bolster Russian forces in, for example, Kursk. This is the Russians doing the same with Belarus. This is serious. Some people have been saying Belarus has now been formally drawn into the war. So if nothing else, if you take nothing else away from today's video, you should take this warning. Belarus could be now able to send troops directly to Russia to help defend the Russian borders at least. Okay. Trump has said military equipment and the right to fight on. That's what the US minerals deal has given Ukraine. So the big news from yesterday was that a deal has been agreed upon. It hasn't been signed. And there are some people saying actually the Ukrainians still might not, and there's etc., etc. But the Americans are certainly saying, and many people are reporting, that a deal has been agreed upon. I'm not happy with that. I think it's still extortion, although the claims are that they have dropped all the harshest, most stringent demands that the Americans had. So, that's good, but it's still a deal to essentially pay for what was given as grants and aid. So I think that is a real challenge still. So lots to talk about concerning this minerals deal agreement later in another video, but I just thought I'd throw this out there to let you know that's happened. Most of you will know this, but also the rationale given by Trump, which is military equipment and the right to fight on. But that's not new military equipment. That's just military equipment they've already been given. There is a lack of clarity on what the US will do going forward with regard to military aid to Ukraine and the right to fight on. I really, really, really dislike Trump, even more than I used to. Like, everything he's doing at the moment is for Russia, and lots of people are saying this. Like, what would it look like how different would it look if the US has set out formally and officially to do everything they could to help Russia? Like, if they literally were like formally an ally of Russia, what are they doing now that looks any different to that? And the answer is really nothing. Like, everything they're doing is just for the benefit of Russia. So this deal here kind of screws over Ukraine and doesn't give them, it's helping themselves to Ukraine's recovery funds, really, at least somewhat. And the claim is, well, it gives them the right to fight on. You don't give them the right to fight on. That is their inherent right. Ontology of rights aside, like, that's just obscene to me. It's obscene that the right for a sovereign nation to defend itself is given to them by Donald Trump through an extortion, natural resources extraction, scare quotes, deal. That's what gives the Ukrainians the right to fight. Just absolutely insane. So Trump and Zelensky would visit DC in February the 28th to sign the deal, which gives Kyiv, quote, military equipment and the right to fight on. He also said the US was open to a minerals deal with Russia. And this is where it gets absolutely, I'm so angry. Every day I think, God, it can't get worse. And then it's like, oh no, we want to do some deals with Russia. Russia very cleverly, by the way, this is Putin being very clever, said, oh, you want natural resources? We got loads you can have. Come and do business with us in Russia. And it's just a way of them getting back into the international scene. And because Trump is so transactional, he's like, money, ching, 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 money, money. And then now he wants to do a deal with Russia. I just am disgusted. But there you go. It's not like you didn't know that, but it's just like every day, it's just more. This is more of the same. Russia says it will meet the US representatives tomorrow in Istanbul in Turkey. And I said Turkey, watch out for Turkey. I think it's going to be an important player. So Foreign Minister Lavrov says that they will not stop the war ahead of any possible peace deal. And of course, Ukraine has not been invited tomorrow. Of course, the US and Russia are going to do a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine, because that's what it would look like if you're on the side of Russia. And I'm going to keep saying that. That's what it would look like if you're on the side of Russia. That's what it would look like if you're on the side of Russia. And then the Russian media responds. In one of today's Russian papers, says Steve Rosenberg, quote, Putin and Trump are close in ideology and values. Putin is his natural ally. That's what it would look like if you're on the side of Russia. But interestingly, and I've reported on this previously, but there are more and more of these turning up, Russians are not happy with Putin and Trump getting so close. and the US doing these deals bilaterally with Russia. The Russians themselves are not happy. So it's just one, of course, pinch of salt, but this is just one view from a Russian, Samoylov, whoever that is. The special military operation results. Not a single large Ukrainian city was captured. Lost over 150,000 fighters in 3 years. And you can argue that that's very conservative. Rare earth metals go to the US. Think about that deal, but also within occupied Ukraine. Ukrainians have the largest army in Europe. Demilitarization was supposed to be the one of the objectives. Embittered Ukrainians hate Russians even more. And here he claims that goes against denazification objectives. NATO border has expanded by 2 times. Finland, Sweden joining NATO. European soldiers to be deployed in Ukraine. It's looking like a likelihood. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, and I think he has got a right, assuming it's a he, has got a right to be annoyed. I mean, the whole thing is just a big pile of crap. I'm going to leave you with this. Here's an image from a Ukrainian artist, and it's entitled "Monsters Do Indeed Exist." So when you hear me whinging on about Donald Trump, you're like, well, really? Take it from me, and take it from, I've heard many Ukrainians now who have said they feel completely betrayed. Anastasia Paraskova last night in a live with Andrew Mikado was like, yeah, I thought it was bad, and then and I wanted to give Trump a chance, blah, 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 and then it was looking bad, and then when it came to the UN vote, she's like, no, they are now the enemy. That's how the Ukrainians feel, and that's why they are creating artwork like this, which is the Statue of Liberty crying, the Sauron Mordor Z shining bright, and Putin with his horrible orcish hands there, shaking hands with Donald Trump. Blood dripping down through those hands. Ukrainian blood. And Russian blood. That sums up what the Ukrainians think. But I was going to leave you with that, because I think it's powerful. But I want to leave you with a positive, which is, I mean, the negative is that you've got a British guy phoning in that has been absolutely sucked in by Russian propaganda. And I've been meaning to do this for about 2 years, but I want to do a debunking series where I take each myth that's created. Here's a myth of kind of, there was a coup in 2014 and the Americans flooded Ukraine with arms and they replaced the government. That's the myth here. But Ian Dale on LBC, I don't agree with Ian Dale. Like, he's not my cup of tea particularly, but he pushes back big time here, and I like it. So that's positive. Let's leave you with that.
Russia, the reason why it invaded Ukraine was because of NATO expansion. Even the head of NATO admitted that. So
you don't believe that sovereign countries have a right to determine which defensive bloc that they wish to join. You think that a country like Ukraine should have that dictated to it by a big country like Russia, because that's not the kind of world I want to live in.
The thing is, you need to see it in context. I think you ignore that in 2014, the United States funded a coup in Ukraine and replaced the pro-Russian government, whether you agree with it or not, with an anti-Russian government. So
the Ukrainian government was elected by the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, but after there was a coup, and after
there was not a coup. There was not a coup
with arms. So if the same thing happened in Scotland, you would be against that, wouldn't you?
Honestly, I don't know which channels you've been watching on the internet, but I suspect that you need to watch some different ones and don't swallow this ridiculous Russian propaganda that you and so many other people seem to swallow. Dan, I'd like to say it's been a pleasure, but it really hasn't.
I love it. I'd like to say it's been a pleasure, but it hasn't. Now, sod off. I've spoken to people at this coup. Have you? Have you actually spoken to Ukrainians? How much do you know about what happened in 2014? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Whatever. But well done, Ian Dale, for calling him out. That's enough from me. Take care. Speak soon. Oh, and please remember to not tie a knot in your pajamas. Please remember to check out DZYGA'S, the charity fundraiser we're doing for drones for the front line, thermal optic drones. We are over $10,000 towards $17,500. That is absolutely fantastic. If you press the donate button, you'll get taken to here. And if you do copy ATP for try, please make sure you copy that comment and put it in the pay fields so that your payment is apportioned to our campaign. If you haven't done that, if you've made a payment, can you please contact them and let them know that that payment and how much it was should be for the ATP geopolitics, because otherwise it won't turn up here. So that payment definitely needs to have some evidence of it being for ATP for Triad. But please help that out. Go and check out the live stream I did with Arena. It was really good. And thank you for helping if you do.